The last alien of her kind obsessed with one human HFY Sci-Fi tale. The observatory hummed quietly, its transparent walls offering an uninterrupted view of the planet below. Talaris floated effortlessly in zero gravity, her shimmering form glowing faintly in the dim light of her ship. She was the last of the Arathii, a species that had once spanned galaxies, their advanced civilizations thriving for millennia. But now, she was alone, her kind reduced to nothing more than stardust and fading memories. Her amethyst-hued eyes locked on the holographic display before her. The human was there again. His name was Eli Carter, a maintenance worker on an orbital station circling the blue-and-green planet humans called Earth, ordinary by most standards, short, with an unruly mop of dark hair and a penchant for talking to himself while working. And yet, Talaris found herself drawn to him in a way she could not explain. At first, it was curiosity. Humans were strange creatures, fragile yet resilient, capable of both great destruction and unparalleled compassion. Talaris had spent decades observing them from afar, documenting their behavior and culture. But Eli was different. There was something about the way he moved, the way he spoke to the empty corridors of his station, as if he were filling the void of his solitude with fragments of his soul. She had first noticed him when his station's external sensor array malfunctioned. While other humans might have cursed or rushed through the repair, Eli had approached the task with care and patience, humming softly to himself as he worked. He treated the cold, unfeeling machinery as though it were alive, as though it mattered. It reminded her of how the Arathii once treated their own creations, with reverence and love. Weeks turned into months, and Talaris's fascination deepened. She began to intercept his communications, listening to his voice as he sent status updates to his superiors. She learned his routines, his likes and dislikes, his quirks. She even discovered that he played a stringed instrument called a guitar during his free time, its melodies hauntingly beautiful in the stillness of space. It was illogical, of course. Her people had prided themselves on their rationality, their ability to suppress emotions for the sake of progress. But Talaris no longer had a people to answer to, no council to reprimand her for indulging in sentimentality. She was free to feel, free to long. One day, as Eli conducted his routine checks on the station's outer hull, Talaris made a decision. She activated her ship's cloaking field and maneuvered closer to the station, her heart, a biological relic of her species, pounding in her chest. "Who are you?" she whispered to herself as she watched him work. "And why do you make me feel this way?" The opportunity came sooner than she expected. A micrometeorite shower struck the station, breaching a section of its hull. Eli's tether snapped, sending him tumbling into the void. Talaris didn't hesitate. With a thought, she deactivated her ship's cloaking and activated her tractor beam, pulling him into the safety of her vessel. When Eli awoke, he found himself in a room bathed in soft, violet light. Talaris stood before him, her form both alien and ethereal, her translucent skin shimmering like liquid starlight. "You're not human," he said, his voice shaky but calm. "No," Talaris replied, her voice melodic and tinged with sorrow. "I am Talaris, the last of the Arathii." Eli sat up, his gaze meeting hers. "You saved me." "Why?" Talaris hesitated. How could she explain the unexplainable? That she had watched him for months, fascinated by his humanity? That he had become her anchor in a universe that felt increasingly empty? "Because," she said finally, "you are remarkable." Eli blinked, his expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Me? I'm just a maintenance guy." "No," Talaris said, stepping closer. "You are more than that. You are human, and that is enough." In the days that followed, the two shared stories, of Talaris's lost civilization, of Eli's life on Earth, of the loneliness that had shaped them both. Slowly, a bond formed, one that transcended species and logic. For the first time in centuries, Talaris felt hope. Perhaps she was no longer the last of her kind, not truly, perhaps. In Eli, she had found a reason to continue, a reason to believe in the beauty of connection. And perhaps, just perhaps, the universe wasn't so lonely after all. As the days turned into weeks aboard Talaris's ship, Eli adjusted surprisingly quickly to his new reality. The vessel, with its flowing, organic architecture and bioluminescent walls, felt more alive than any human spacecraft he'd ever set foot on. It hummed softly around him, responding to Talaris's unspoken commands, almost as if it were a part of her. Eli often found himself watching Talaris when she thought he wasn't looking. There was a grace to her movements, a quiet sadness in her eyes, but also a fierce curiosity that mirrored his own. He couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder and confusion. Why had an alien so advanced, so extraordinary, chosen to save someone as mundane as him? One evening, if time even existed aboard her ship, Eli found Talaris in what appeared to be a central observatory. She stood motionless before a massive viewport, her translucent form shimmering faintly in the starlight. The sight was breathtaking, but there was something more, a loneliness in her posture that Eli couldn't ignore. "You look like you've got the weight of a galaxy on your shoulders," he said, breaking the silence. Talaris turned, her gaze softening as she saw him. "In some ways, I do," she admitted. Eli stepped closer, leaning against the frame of the viewport. "I get it, you're the last of your kind, that's a lot." "It is," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The Arathii believed in the collective, we were never meant to exist alone, and now, I do." Eli hesitated before responding. "You're not alone now." Talaris studied him for a moment, her glowing eyes unreadable. "No, I suppose I'm not," she said softly. They stood in silence for a while, the stars stretching endlessly before them. Finally, Eli cleared his throat. "So, what happens now? Am I, like, your pet human or something?" Talaris's expression shifted, and for the first time, Eli thought he saw a flicker of amusement. "You are no one's pet," she said, "though I admit, your species intrigues me." Eli smirked. "Yeah? What's so intriguing about us? We're messy, loud, and constantly screwing things up." "And yet," Talaris said, stepping closer to him, "you endure, you create, you love, even when it is illogical or painful. That is something my people struggle to understand. Perhaps that is why I chose to save you." Eli scratched the back of his neck, suddenly feeling self-conscious. "Well, I guess I should thank you for not letting me drift off into oblivion." Talaris tilted her head. "You are welcome." They both laughed, his a nervous chuckle, hers a sound like wind chimes in the breeze. It was a small moment, but it was enough to chip away at the walls between them. Over the following weeks, Talaris began teaching Eli about her people. She showed him holographic recordings of their cities, their art, their music. In return, Eli shared stories of Earth, of bustling cities, sprawling forests, and his favorite greasy diner back in Kansas. He played his guitar for her, the notes filling the ship with a warmth it had never known. One night, as Eli strummed a quiet tune, Talaris watched him intently. "Your music, it feels alive," she said. "That's the idea," Eli replied, plucking a string. "It's a way of expressing what words can't, a way to connect." "Connect," Talaris repeated, as if testing the word. Eli looked up at her. "You said your people didn't understand love, right? Maybe that's what makes us human. We're hardwired to care about each other, even when it doesn't make sense." Talaris was silent for a long time, her gaze distant. Finally, she said, "Perhaps there is more of the Arathii in you than I realized." Eli raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "Our creators, those who shaped our species, designed us to seek connection, to build and grow together. Somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. We became consumed by logic and perfection, and it led to our end." "But you didn't lose it," Eli said, his voice firm. "You saved me. That's connection, right? That's love." Talaris blinked, her glowing eyes meeting his. "Perhaps," she murmured. For the first time in centuries, Talaris felt something stir within her, a warmth she couldn't quite name. She had saved Eli to satisfy her curiosity, but now, she realized, he was saving her in return. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. The weeks aboard Talaris's ship stretched into months, and the bond between Eli and Talaris grew deeper. They had become more than just an alien and a human. They were partners, co-conspirators in a vast, silent exploration of the universe. Eli had learned more about the Arathii than he had ever expected, stories of their grand cities, their cultural marvels, and their eventual fall. Talaris had absorbed as much from him about Earth as she could, his simple pleasures, his humor, his deep-rooted belief in the beauty of imperfection. But something was stirring beneath the surface. Talaris had been hiding something from Eli, something she had been too afraid to reveal. One evening, as the ship drifted through the outskirts of a nebula, Eli noticed a flicker of unease in Talaris's gaze. She stood at the front of the observation deck, her figure outlined against the swirling colors of the nebula, her arms crossed loosely over her chest. "Eli," she began, her voice quieter than usual, "there's something I need to tell you." Eli put down his guitar, sensing the gravity in her tone. "What's going on?" Talaris turned to face him, her expression conflicted, as if weighing the words before speaking. "I've been watching you, closely, and I've come to realize something I didn't want to admit." Eli frowned. "What is it?" "I have been holding on to something," she said, her voice catching slightly. "I saved you because I thought I was reaching out for something, an anchor in the vast emptiness of space, a connection, but I fear I am becoming too attached." Eli's heart skipped a beat. "Attached? I don't understand." Talaris stepped forward, her eyes soft and vulnerable. "You are human, Eli. Your lifespan, your needs, they are fleeting in comparison to mine, to the Arathii." She exhaled sharply. "And I fear I've started to." She didn't need to finish the sentence. Eli understood. In a universe where time was a cruel adversary, where entire species could blink out of existence in an instant, their connection was a fragile thing. Talaris had lived through eons of solitude, but she had found a spark of something with Eli, something that felt like love. But was it truly possible? Could she afford to care for someone so brief in the grand scheme of things? "Listen," Eli said, stepping toward her. "I don't know what the future holds, but I can tell you one thing: I'm not going anywhere, not unless you tell me to." Talaris's eyes searched his face, as if looking for signs of deception, but all she found was honesty. He took her hand, the touch grounding her in a way nothing else had. "We don't need to know the ending to start this journey, Talaris. I'm here, and I'm not leaving." For the first time in a long while, Talaris allowed herself to feel the full weight of the connection between them. She had lived 1,000 lifetimes, but this, the possibility of love, of a shared future, even a short one, was something she had longed for in the depths of her soul. "You mean it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Yeah," Eli said with a soft smile. "We're in this together, wherever it takes us." Talaris's chest tightened as a strange, almost alien feeling washed over her. Hope. She had never known it as an Arathii, but now, in the presence of this human, it felt as real as the stars outside the viewport. But the universe, as it always did, had its own plans. Just as they were beginning to settle into their newfound understanding, a sudden and violent tremor shook the ship. The stars outside the viewport warped and flickered as the ship's systems screamed in alarm. Talaris's expression shifted instantly from warmth to focus as she darted toward the control panel, her fingers flying across the holographic interface. "What's happening?" Eli asked, his heart racing. "Something's interfering with the ship's systems," Talaris said, her voice strained. "A force field of some kind, like an energy field, but I've never encountered anything like it." Before Eli could ask any more questions, the ship lurched again, and the lights flickered. A voice echoed through the ship, a guttural tone he had never heard before. "Arathii vessel, you are trespassing in forbidden space. Surrender immediately or face extinction." Eli's stomach dropped. "Who the hell is that?" Talaris's face paled. "No," she whispered, "it can't be." A massive shadow appeared outside the viewport, blocking out the nebula's light. It was a ship, vast and dark, like a beast of metal and flame. Talaris's breath hitched as she recognized it. "The Trallas," she whispered, her voice filled with dread. "They are a warlike species, hunters who prey on anything they perceive as a threat to their territory. I thought they were myth, but it seems they're real." Eli's heart raced. "What do we do?" "We fight," Talaris said, her voice cold and determined. "I won't let them take you, not again." Talaris's ship shook violently again, the sound of metal scraping against metal filling the air. In the distance, the shadow of the Trallas ship loomed ever closer. The battle for their survival was about to begin. Talaris's hands flew across the control panel with practiced precision, adjusting the ship's defenses, rerouting power to shields and weapons systems. Eli's heart raced as he watched her move, her calm, focused demeanor masking the storm of uncertainty that lingered in her eyes. The looming threat of the Trallas felt too vast, too powerful for them to handle. He couldn't shake the feeling that their time together might be slipping away before it had even truly begun. "Can we outrun them?" Eli asked, his voice strained as he gripped onto a console for balance. "No," Talaris replied, her eyes narrowing. "The Trallas ships are faster, better equipped for combat. We'll need to fight or outwit them." Eli's mind raced. He had no experience in space warfare, let alone defending himself against a species that seemed as merciless as the Trallas. He wasn't the hero type, he was just a maintenance worker, a guy who fixed things on a space station. But he had to try, for Talaris, for whatever strange connection had blossomed between them. "What do we need to do?" Eli asked, a note of determination creeping into his voice. Talaris's gaze softened, almost imperceptibly. "I'll need you to help me. The Trallas will try to board us once they disable our shields. I'll need you to man the defense grid while I handle the ship's navigation." Eli nodded, his pulse quickening. He had no idea how he would manage, but there was no turning back now. The ship was their only home, and it was under attack. "Understood. Just tell me what to do." The ship shook again, more violently this time. Sparks flew from one of the overhead conduits as the Trallas ship sent a warning shot that rattled the walls. A deep rumbling echoed through the hull, as if the ship itself was groaning in pain. "Brace yourself," Talaris called out, her voice cutting through the chaos. "We're going to need to shift the shields. Stay close to the console, and don't let it overload." Eli moved swiftly, Positioning himself beside the weapon systems, Talaris had already brought up the targeting arrays, and he could see the faint red outline of the Tralis vessel, slowly creeping closer to their ship. He had no formal training, but something instinctive inside him kicked in, the hum of the ship's systems, the rhythmic beeps of the targeting software. He focused on them, pushing out his fear. Targeting system online, he muttered to himself, hands shaking as he adjusted the firing mechanisms. Ready, he said, looking at Talaris. Just tell me when. Talaris didn't respond immediately, her focus fixed on the approaching enemy vessel. She was calculating something, her alien intellect working in overdrive as she analyzed the situation. A part of Eli wondered what it was like to have centuries of knowledge, to understand the universe in ways humans never could. Then her eyes snapped to his, a spark of urgency in her gaze. Fire on my mark, we can't risk them getting too close. Eli didn't hesitate, his fingers hovered over the trigger, waiting for her signal. The Tralis ship fired again, this time hitting their shield with a shockwave that knocked Eli off balance. He stumbled but quickly regained his footing. The shields flared briefly, but they held, shimmering with the ship's defensive energy. However, the impact had caused a breach in the system, the external lights flickered, and the ship's hum became erratic. I've got a breach in the secondary hull, Talaris shouted, her voice sharp. We need to seal it now or they'll board us. Eli cursed under his breath. Can we outrun them while I do that? No. Talaris's eyes flickered with frustration. We'll need to fight, now. Before Eli could respond, she barked, fire. His hand slammed down on the firing mechanism, and the ship's weapons came to life. The high-powered lasers streaked toward the Tralis ship, striking it with force. The Tralis ship returned fire almost immediately, but their shields weren't as strong as the Arathii vessels. The impact rattled the ship, but they managed to hold their ground. Direct hit. We've damaged their outer hull, Talaris reported, her voice steady but strained. But they're still closing in. Prepare for boarding. The realization hit Eli like a punch to the gut. The Tralis were coming. They were going to board the ship. Stay close to me, Talaris said, her voice low. If they breach the hull, we'll need to fight. I can't allow them to take you. Eli nodded, the gravity of the situation sinking in. He had no weapons, no combat experience, but he wasn't going to let Talaris face this alone. She had already saved him once, and now it was his turn to protect her. I'm with you, he said, his voice steady despite the pounding of his heart. We'll figure this out. The sound of metal scraping against metal filled the ship, followed by a violent explosion. A breach had occurred on the lower deck. The Tralis had arrived. Ready yourself, Talaris said, her eyes locking onto his, her expression fierce and protective. Before Eli could respond, the hatch to the lower deck flew open, and alien figures clad in dark, jagged armor poured into the room. Their eyes were cold, calculating, predators. Eli instinctively reached for anything that might serve as a weapon. His hand found a metal rod lying on the floor from an earlier repair. He gripped it tightly, his muscles tense as the first Tralis soldier advanced. Stay behind me, Talaris ordered, stepping forward, her hands glowing faintly with energy. She was ready. Eli didn't move, even as the first alien lunged at them. He stepped forward, raising the metal rod in defense. The battle for their lives was just beginning.